Hi everybody, Kelvin here from London. Stereo Review X is my channel. I review vintage hi-fi equipment, which I've got loads of, and I've had loads of, over time. So just going to quickly, I want to sort of chip in, say what I think about this question that seems to come up a lot, does vintage stuff sound better? Why does it sound better? Okay, I'm going to just give two big reasons of what went on in the vintage hi-fi world, or what's going on now, quite in a way you would say. Okay, first thing is, number one, these things weren't cheap in the first place, yeah? This Marantz would have cost you a small fortune in 1975, or, So, when you buy this, you can get this for, maybe you can get it for like £275, about 300 odd US dollars. You're getting something that costs probably, back in the day, would have been like, well over $1,000, like 1,500, a ton of money, So, there's a ton of build quality, I mean, they probably spent more on these buttons and facade on this Marantz than they do on, half an amplifier today. So there's a lot of build quality, and of course it's way later. You're not getting, you're buying these things second hand, and they're a lot cheaper, obviously they are. So point is, they weren't cheap in the first place. So, quite often you're buying something that had quite a lot of build quality in it, Okay, that's one reason. Second reason, this is a big reason. In the 70s, I'm counting vintage stereo to really, I'll broadly say literally the 70s, the whole of the 1970s. There was mass demand for stereo equipment, yeah? Every person that bought records, which was every young baby boomer, wanted a stereo, and to get a good stereo like this was literally out of the reach of anyone, sub 25 for sure. This was things your uncle might get, I mean, you might get one of these if you really spend a lot of time saving up. But they were highly prestigious things and expensive. Point I'm making is, there's a ton of people wanting to buy a stereo. The companies were going crazy, trying to get a bigger slice of the market. Now here's the point. At some point, people were, at the early 70s, people were trying to make things sound good. That was the way they were selling things, by making it sound good. Because people would listen to things in shops and showrooms and blah blah blah. And then at some point, let's call it 1980, roughly, maybe a bit earlier, but it's this broad what I'm doing for you now. But at some point, people discovered that you could sell stuff by advertising it, making it look really good, and switching what is important about it to a metric called statistics, yeah, or figures like watts, yeah, because it's easily understood by the public. Watts and distortion figures, yeah. So people would think, oh, this one is 55 watts, that's better than 35 watts, and this one has got 0.01 distortion figure, and this one's got 0.05 or whatever it is. When things like valve amps have literally sometimes 1%, 1.0, right? Like 10 times, sometimes 100 times more distortion, but they sound good. But you can't do the sound on a magazine photograph, yeah? So these things happened whereby they stopped trying. A lot of the mass companies just realized we can do it with advertising and statistics, and it doesn't matter so much what it sounds like. So that is a big deal. Add to that, things I'm sure went on with exchange rates between certainly Japan and Britain and America, and they just couldn't make the quality things, put in the the expense. The things just had to get cheaper, so there's some big reasons there. Now I'm just going to quickly say what I would describe what's happened to sound generally, and the easiest way I say it is by the 80s a lot of the life had gone out of amplifiers, and maybe speakers too, but definitely amplifiers. Integration of integrated circuit or whatever, chips basically in amplifiers that saves you saves you costs. The way they were building amplifiers, the cheapening of it, just essentially took the life out of the sound, took the vibrancy out of the sound, and also took, and here's an interesting point about the watts issue, because watts sell, that's why they made receivers that were 185 watts. I think Pioneer made one 185. Someone landed up making one 220 watts. You don't even want all those watts unless you've got a huge house and a huge pair of speakers. But the point is, what happened, I believe, is the figures for, so you could say, how can we get the wattage figure up for this amp, right? Well, what seems to happen is you can get the watt figure up, so make it into 70 watts, say, but what you've destroyed is the dynamic headroom, its ability to have dormant power waiting for explosive and complex bits of music. So when you say you get a drum thing, a psh, bass drum and cymbal, when you've got power waiting and there's an explosive sound like that, you can deliver that explosively. Whereas if you've somehow, whatever you've done to your amplifier, that it's rated highly, but in fact what it can't now do is have the dormant power ready, because you're already using up all its power just to do ordinary things. I mean, technically I don't get it, but basically the dynamicness, the explosiveness, the dynamic headroom, if you like, went out the window, because we can make this amp, call it a 70 watt amp, when really maybe we should make a 30 watt amp that's got some dynamism about it, and sound better. But this looked better in magazines and statistics. There's also probably complicity, yes, between the magazines and the producers to sell things, to review things nicely so they sell, because it was huge business, probably bigger than today. It's more about the high end, anyway. So those are the sort of big reasons what happened to sound. And for me, through the 80s and 90s, the sound became flat, it became uninteresting. Speaker manufacturers, I think they weren't doing the R&D, the research and development, or they started to think about looks more than anything else, and cheaper materials and stuff like that. Different materials came. Okay, actually this is important. Speakers, they started basically trying to eliminate all distortion, because this would be good for a speaker if you could say it's got low distortion. But the fact is, you could take all the distortion out, possible distortion out of everything, and turn it into, again, a lifeless thing, so you might have a valve amp with 1% distortion and some big speakers with some big paper cones, hopefully a dome tweeter, not a cone tweeter, and it would sound really exciting and really vibrant and really lively. And unless you're turning it up really loud, or but the point is, it would have so much more life and dynamism, and be very enjoyable. And the pursuit of diminishing all possible distortion being able to raise the wattage figures for a small pair of speakers to like 100 watts, are this big, but they're not delivering anything. You know, you've restrained all the problems, but you've basically strangled it. You just strangled it to death. And there were loads of speakers in their 80s and 90s with high wattage. It just didn't give you anything. You know, it just didn't deliver a full sound. I mean, it might have measured good in an anechoic chamber, or designed it good on a computer. It didn't sound good. Anyway, there's tons of that. So that's probably it. I could go into tons of detail about what makes, maybe I'm happy to do that, but I just wanted to give an overview. Does vintage sound better? Pretty much it does. There are some good things out nowadays. They're few and far between, and it's hard to find them. Yeah, it's hard to find them and find your way through a maze of people that are trying to sell you things. So this is part of the problem. That has always been the problem. How to avoid the pitfalls of basically people trying to sell you things. I'll tell you what we got here just quickly if you're interested. Pioneer SX550. I think this is 25 watts. Marantz 2238BL, 38 watts. Whenever it says the last two figures in these numbers, it's the wattage. So if that was 2225, it's 25 watts. Celestion DIN11, Rogers LS35A, Bang & Olufsen S75, and these damn Kefs, whose name I can never remember, begins with C. Sorry, I can't remember. Okay, that's it. I mean, yeah, okay, that's it. Just wanted to put in my 2 pence worth into the does vintage sound better. And the other thing, of course, is hi-fi has never been cheap. Yeah, so when you go out, you can spend £600 on an amplifier. It might not be any good. This is the thing, you could spend tons of money. It's always expensive, so if you're buying second hand, you're probably getting it a third or a quarter of what it cost, particularly if it's 20, 30, 40 years ago. Okay, a bit rambling, sorry, but there you have it. Okay, thanks, bye for now.